Hey there, short film fans. Welcome back to the Cameo Launch Short Film Showcase. And if you're joining us from Podcast Land, welcome back to the Cameo Launch Short Film Podcast. We've got a very special Filmmaker's Choice episode for you. As you'll probably have guessed from the thumbnail, we're talking to writer-director Ben Aston, who brought us amazing short films that include Russian Roulette, Dinner and a Movie, and the main focus of our interview, He Took His Skin Off For Me. In our interview with director Misha Vertkin last year, he highlighted Ben Aston's fantasy romance short as a film that had an impact on him as a filmmaker. And Ben in turn highlights some short films that stand out for him as well. We've also been kind enough to include the links for those films in the description. Ben takes us on his journey as a filmmaker, the personal inspirations for much of his work, and what we can expect from him in the future. Listen and enjoy. Thank you for taking the time out to have a chat with us about your film, He Took His Skin Off For Me, and we'll want to dive into some of your other films that you've done as well, and also talk about some of the short films that have made an impact on you and inspired you. So hopefully we'll be able to dive into those in a bit of detail.
Yeah.
But firstly, would you mind taking us through sort of your journey into film, what led you to it, how you then started to build your filmmaking career and establish that trajectory?
Sure thing, man. I don't know. I the way I look at it now is that I realize that if I wasn't filling my time with projects and just sort of getting people together to sort of make story things happen, then I realize now that I was sad. So it kind of, in a way, it was just a sort of life-giving thing that I just had to do. And it was only as I sort of grew up and started to sort of you start to choose the things you're supposed to do, I sort of realized this is what I do. And mainly in sort of around sort of 16, 17 was when I started to really turn over and start making actual short films on a regular basis with people I went to school with who I still work with today, actually.
Right.
And we all failed upwards together, and we just kept on turning over. And I didn't want to do a film school thing because I was too cool, you see. I was too cool for film school. I didn't want the man to tell me how to make my films. Also, because I was a complete coward and didn't feel confident calling myself an artist and all sorts of insecurities and stuff. And so I did a philosophy degree, which was I felt like it was a smart idea at the time because you get about 5 hours of lectures a week, so you can just keep making films. And then during that degree, and the thing is, most people who do philosophy, either they want to become academics or they want to become comedians or filmmakers anyway. So I actually met a lot of people who, again, I still work with from that sort of experience. Me and my friends from school, we made a corporate film thing, a production company, I guess. We started to turn over on just a lot of seminars, a lot of motivational speakers and stuff. And I just moved to London, and I didn't know anybody in film. I didn't know anything about film. I just assumed this was it. I felt like I was in a bit of a cul-de-sac. And then I applied for the London Film School, and I went there, and I did a post degree there, and that's where I met Maria, who is not only my partner, but the person who wrote He Took His Skin Off For Me. And then I did a degree there, which was weird and insane and intense and wonderful. My grandmother left me a bit of money, so I was able to afford the degree, which was really amazing. And and then from there, it's just been the sort of the process of transitioning into becoming a professional film man, according to the HMRC.
Right.
So I guess that's it. It's not a very interesting story. I want to say I found this sword in the stone at some point. And it was like this, but really, I just never ever considered doing anything else, and it's always been a part of what I have become.
Well, I think that has to be key to actually making it what you do, right? I mean, if you can imagine yourself doing something else, circumstances of life will more than likely take you in that direction away from
possibly, yeah. Right? I didn't allow for the possibility that I could become a therapist or something.
Right. Yeah. Which, ironically, you probably have been through your work.
Well, no, 100%. Like the art is all therapy. It's free therapy, man. It's just taking the ideas out of the back of your mind and making sure that I don't dream about skinless men anymore. I can just put it out there and it's completely off my chest.
Which, in and of itself, was just such an achievement. I've gone back and looked at that film. He Took His Skin Off Me so many times, and
wow,
just the prosthetic work on its own is an achievement beyond anything that you generally tend to see.
Jen who did it and the whole team, I watched it again recently, just for this because I haven't seen it in a while. Because when you make a film, you watch it infinite amount of times, and then you watch it again for an infinite amount of times, basically after it's finished, and then you learn everything from it, and then I can't watch it anymore. But I decided to go back and watch it, and it's been enough time now that I feel like it was almost somebody else's film. What they did was I can talk about like how they did it and everything, but it genuinely it was like they helped us. They're so good, and I just love them so much.
I mean, I think it's kind of a reflection when you have people doing incredible work. I think it's a reflection of how much they believe in the project and what it's trying to do, or the story and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was Maria's story. And the second I'd read it, I was like, oh well, I mean, we could do this. Like, it's one of those things where you really like, oh, I see this, I can see this. Yeah, I mean, we could do this. It'll be fine. There's just
absolutely
it's a guy in a house. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And I think contextually as well, I think for special effects people, because the way we did it was we didn't go through a company or a house. We had to basically build our own special effects company for this one project. And it's supposed to say I don't really I'm not sort of big into special effects particularly. Like it's not really something I was ever particularly interested in. But I knew that to tell the story is something I had to get into, and I knew that there was a sort of 2-day course where Colin Arthur, who was the supervisor for the Neverending Story and a bunch of other stuff. Like he'd made a bunch of stuff, and he just set up his own company with his wife, and they'd done a lot of things through the '80s. And he'd worked with Ray Harryhausen and on the side. Like he's 70 years old already. Like this guy, he's old and wonderful. And so he I think now like makes quite a living either just sort of doing maquettes and props for the productions he worked on, but also like teaching. And there was like a 2-day course about how to do for your own hand or something. And I knew that this is the film I wanted to make, so I'm going to have to learn a little bit about what's involved. So I went to this course for 2 days, and I met Jen there. And at the end of the class, I then went up to we all went to the pub, and I went to Colin and Colin's wife, and I told them Maria's story, and they were like, "Well, this is awesome. Let's do it." Like, I mean, here you can use these guys, all these students and stuff. We can build it together. I can help teach as part of the course thing. You've got to go out there and raise make Jen your special effects supervisor. She was a guardian at a sort of when like houses or buildings they need people to settle in them so that they don't. But it's like you can sort of pay very low rent to stay in a building that might not have full heating or something. She was a guardian in like an old folks home in Chiswick in West London, and so we had this huge space, and we're going to turn this into a special effects studio workhouse, and we're going to build these muscles, and you're going to do it, and Colin's going to teach everybody, and all the people who are going to want to get involved in it are going to be working on something that isn't just a zombie movie or something. And it's also doing something that's like kind of impossible, because it's like you're taking away something by adding something to the outside of the human body, and that doesn't. How do you do that? It doesn't work. And like our skinless man Sebastian, like he does look a bit chonky in the movie, but that's fine. Like I think it's actually quite nice as part of the aesthetic, and we designed it to be not horrific, but to be more like the body beautiful and sort of Da Vincian and sort of gory, but also beautiful and blah blah blah. And we'd seen a lot of examples of like other films where they do this, like Hellraiser does this. I think in the first one when the guy, it's not a film I'm particularly. I have. It's a film that terrified me as a kid, so I haven't seen it since. But I remember there was like a skinless guy in it, yeah, I'm actually not. I actually don't particularly like horror films. I'm not a big horror film fan. They scare me, and I like sleeping. And I can only afford to watch.
Sleeping is fun. I enjoy sleeping.
I really like sleeping. I genuinely get get so upset by horror films that they make me not sleep.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so I rewatched Get Out again this year because I was like, okay, I love that film. I'm gonna watch it again. And once again, I couldn't sleep that night very well. And so I'm like, I basically limit myself to like 2 horror films a year max. I'm just and all the good films right now are horror films, so I'm screwed. Anyway, so there's actually a Robbie Williams video as well where
yes, that's right.
And in that one, in that one, he's wearing a full body sort of suit. And so when he bends over, it's like if you were to bend over with a t-shirt on, you'd see the folds in it, which we couldn't do because if you see the folds, then it's obviously on the outside. So what we had to do was basically build a jigsaw puzzle piece of hundreds of different little tiny pieces that have to go on his body that are applied. So instead of being one long suit that he gets into, it's individual muscles are all painted and plastered onto him and have been individually painted and designed. And the really horrible thing is that each one is one use only. You can't reapply it. You have to make a new one.
Oh, really?
So for
Oh,
every
wow.
single day, we had to decide, like, okay, today is a leg day, today is a back and front of the face day, today is this, and then you've got to design a film around that where you've got to make it feel like a benign, realist sort of movie where you are shooting it in complete jigsaw pieces. There's thousands of muscles out there with individual labels on them. You've got to organize all of that. And I think that, like, one of the hidden special effects of the film is the performances where, like, of the two actors, where, like, you don't get the sense that these scenes have been split up over several different days, even within the same scenes.
No, of course not.
And that's just what they're doing. They're just that good. And that was, oh god, I'm getting sort of tremors thinking about the process of making it. It's a lot of work. It's the kind of work that you only do when you kind of don't know how difficult something's going to be as well.
Yeah, I think with film in general, if you were aware of just how much work it was going to be going in, everything you were going to have to do, you just wouldn't do it.
No. I honestly get full identity crises now of like imposter syndrome, where I'm like, no, I'd never make that film now. That's way too much work. Like, I was really cool back when I made that film, like 4 years ago or whatever. Like, I'd never do that now. I'm such a coward by comparison.
No, I mean, not at all. I think it's interesting because obviously the film is a journey for the characters within it, but it's also a journey for the people making it as well. And, you know, at each stage, you're kind of required to meet the challenge that comes up that particular day or that particular week. And I think there's something that a filmmaker takes away from each project on any given day that not just makes the film better, but makes them a better filmmaker. And you know, has without being too esoteric about it, kind of gives them lessons for life in a way. In terms of how to approach something that seems insurmountable at the time. You kind of have to find that solution because the film itself, the production itself, is all consuming. And you know, without meaning to quote Apollo 13, failure is not an option.
It's true.
So you know, you have to find that answer, and I think that ends up being a mindset that you just take into life in general. But one of the questions I did have with Marie being your partner in this film being very much about relationships, how was it working with your partner on a project like this?
It's a very good question, actually, because it's an evolving answer to that question. Because for me, falling in love with Maria was like, it coincided very much with finding my artistic voice, actually. It was at the same point where I started to really, I think it's a transition point where I can say, like, now my films feel like they're like art, and I feel like I'm confident now being an artist. Like, almost like I had to fall in love to be able to even get there. And now I realize so much of my art is about love and about how scared I am and how scary it all is, and just these themes keep they keep coming through. So for me, I almost the very act of working on I know it's true of all the projects I'm working on right now. Like they all feel like they are. I keep on like being like, well, yeah, there's this way that me and Maria like around this that just kind of comes through into all these stories. So in a way, the very act of being in a relationship with the person I was sort of working on the story with did innately kind of absolutely influence the sort of just it couldn't have been there without it sort of thing. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
But the process of working together was tricky because on this one specifically, like she was writing working on a novel, and as sort of that's a very long and time-consuming process. And there was a point where she, through just as a day off, she decided to do like a writing challenge where she was given a prompt, and the prompt was cursed blessings, and then she just free wrote this story, which was I think she drafted it maybe once more, and it was the original title was He Took His Skin Off for Me, which I then misremembered as He Took His Skin Off for Me, or whatever. Anyway, I butchered the title in pitching it, and then that's what it became and whatever, which is quite nice actually, because like that's like grammatical error meant that it felt like a different project. And her story was just this beautiful, perfect, gorgeous little tone poem, point of view story that was then published and done really well. That we just were like, well, this is a film. Like, let's make this as a film. Like, this is obviously a film. We'll shoot it here in our house. Like, let's do it. Like, and I, it's interesting. It's not about us. I don't think any of the stories are about us, actually. The things you kind of put into it are there. Like, for me, one of the sort of ways that I was able to sort of get into the story was the idea that maybe, as a personal metaphor, like I love to live in London. London is difficult. I'm a filmmaker, and it's that point where I'm sort of becoming really a filmmaker, and this is what I want to do. And I appreciate that this is sort of a role in life where there are going to be sacrifices, and that it's not going to be easy. And this is something that I just need to do. But I love you so much. And what if that these two things are incompatible? What would I do? And how terrifying is that? Because I genuinely don't know what I'd do, and I'd probably leave London, stop being a filmmaker or something, and that would tear me apart. And that's one of the sort of creative impulses that was a way of kind of getting into the story that for me was one of the first things that made sense about it. That itself then actually opened up as we started to crowd fund the film and actually started to get other interpretations of what this story was, and it ended up becoming a bit broader, and so that reading became one of the ways that I would direct Seb and be like, okay, now you're me who's scared of, he has to go live in Wales or something because he can't live in London, as a filmmaker, or it's this other story that somebody had told us that actually this is what this film is about. And that was the way that we were able to sort of direct the performances in each scene. It's like, do it more like this, or like this guy. Now you're this guy who just happens to have no skin.
Right. And it's really interesting because when we were watching it, I mean, I watched it with George, who's my co-host on the podcast. By the way, he tore his whole place apart looking for his essay that he wrote on your film.
We do get quite a lot. We get, like, Maria and I get quite a lot of like, she kind of gets cited in Lexus things for and I do occasionally see video essays and stuff, and it just makes me so happy. Because that's like, this is the reason you make art, right? It's so that people can see your art, and for it to be seen, and just so the fact that somebody can process it beyond being like, oh my god, it's just that's the kind of thing that justifies doing what you do.
Oh, amazing! No, but we just sat and we just talked about it for ages. You know, I think we ended up, again, going back to the whole thing about being free therapy. We ended up talking about every bad relationship we ever been in. Good.
That's the point.
And I mean, I really like that interesting sort of theme about somebody who would make sort of massive sacrifices for a partner, and a partner who would just let them do that. And it's really interesting that you explore that concept by having this really gentle in tone piece of art. It's gentle sort of in the way that the narration is delivered and in the pacing, but the visual is so violent.
Yeah.
But it's quietly violent.
Yeah.
And and that sort of delivery mechanism for how much this person's being torn apart by a person who was just letting them sacrifice themselves, who was literally bleeding for them, and they will just let them.
Yeah.
I thought it was really, really interesting, and thematically kind of followed on quite interestingly from Dinner and a Movie, which in a weird way is a very different kind of film, but in a weird way they're similar in that they're both kind of about taking a leap of faith.
Exactly. It's about being. It's actually on different. It's on binary ends of being in love. Because when I made Dinner and a Movie, I was just falling in love, and there's very much a virginal quality to it. And I remember the experience of being like, oh, this is really scary. I'm opening myself up to getting really hurt here, which is necessary for it. Like, to be in love, you have to completely just be like, okay, here's my heart, here's my everything. Like, just you now can step on it if that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And you can't get around that equation. You can't hide that and fall in love, because it just doesn't work, really, unfortunately. So in that film, Randy is a guy who thinks he's found a way around it, which is like, if he can control the situation, if he can have somebody who is just in prison and can automatically fall in love with him, then he doesn't have to risk getting hurt. And that's, of course, the exact opposite happens. In the other side of it being like, well, now I'm fully in love. You have my heart completely. I'm now a different person. I'm this person who is in love, and the Beatles now make sense to me, or whatever. And you know, right. and what would I do to to be this person, and like genuinely, how far would I go? Oh my god, that's not quite scary. And the regarding like the kindness of both of those films, because similarly, like I think on the page, I remember being told that the dinner and movie script was actually very cruel, that it was very cruel to its character, and that it was a very mean film. Whereas in my mind, I was like, no, you don't understand. This is good. This is nice. This is okay, because it's going to be the kindest version of this story possible. Because and same with Skin. Like Skin is unbearable if you were to make it, I think, any other way. I would never want to watch that film, and I would never need. I don't think sort of suffering and punishment and pain, as is particularly impressive as art necessarily. Like I don't think of being like, here, look at this, look at it, look how sad this is necessarily interesting. It can be. It really depends on context, obviously. But for me, being a guy who really lives in rooms a lot of the time and just kind of makes films about people in rooms, it feels obnoxious. So the way that I process this sort of very cruel, strange, striking imagery would be to make the kindest, most gentle, most loving version possible, because that's the way that you would see it and feel about it. And it's why
Right.
I think it was really important, because I think in the short story there isn't a party scene, and it was really important for me that like when I was like in my mind, it's like, well, there has to be the scene where people come in, because the whole point is that those people who are in, for lack of a better word, toxic relationships or relationships that aren't necessarily abusive, but they aren't like making them better people. They're taking it away something from them. Like it's never screaming and like, my skin, it hurt, like, oh my god, the blood. It's normal, and it's normalized, and it's under the surface. And the fact that like this film feels so loving, and yet the imagery is telling you it's a horror film, that these kinds of relationships, that they're putting us like sacrificing for another is brilliant, but in an open and equal loving relationship, it has to be a mutual thing. And in the context of the story, it was very important to me that Anna's character she's not a villain. And I've been talking a lot about the point of view of the man, obviously, because but he isn't the protagonist, or at least he isn't the point of view of the story. It's from the point of view of Anna's character, and she's not a villain. Like she accepts the sacrifice from him without really thinking of the consequences. And there's a moment in the story about sort of 2/3 mark where she thinks and considers the possibility genuinely through action of what that might mean to take her skin off and recoils from it, because she doesn't want to give that. But at the same time, then suddenly this imbalance is creating this sort of resentment and this feeling of just inequality, and what was pure and beautiful before is now it becomes what it is, which is just this. The film becomes grimmer, the shots become longer, the music slips away, the voiceover is gone. It's just there, and suddenly it's just dirty and ugly and shit, and it feels like what you get before a breakup. And that's kind of it's those it's capturing. I have a very odd relationship to my emotions. I often can't see them. I have to sort of think through them a lot of the time. I don't have a very strong emotional intelligence, I don't think. And because of that, I like to try and simulate in film the dreamlike qualities of emotions, where you kind of like, that feels right. That feels like what it feels like, but it's
I would say you have a very strong emotional intelligence. I mean, I don't think you'd be able to tell that kind of story
okay.
without it.
Perhaps then maybe I should say I have a poor emotional intuition, would be the right word. I think I'm using the right hemisphere to think through the left hemisphere, or whichever way that goes.
Yeah, but no, it is interesting because there's no one who's setting, as you were saying, there's no one is setting out to be malicious, but that doesn't mean that extreme damage cannot be done in that kind of a scenario. And when there's no one to get mad at, that ironically causes so much more anger. When there's no direction for a frustration, the kind of buildup of resentment just eventually just becomes toxic.
Yeah, and the thing about it, like, you've done this thing, you've moved out of London or something, and oh god, like one of my favorite. I want to try and make this as vague as possible because I don't want to. But so on Kickstarter, when we did the Kickstarter for this film to get the funding for it, like that was the kind of that was the first taste of like how, for lack of a better word, viral this film was going to become, and how like successful it was eventually going to, and the audience it was going to find, because of just the quality of Maria's story, really, the story that sells the idea, that sells the film, that sells itself, sort of thing. Really, the sort of thing I just got to be a part of and ride, really. And we got an email being like, oh, is this film appropriate for children? I'm really interested in backing this Kickstarter, and I really like Maria's story. Is this appropriate for children? And I was like, Well, I mean, there's a sex scene in it, I guess, and it's quite violent. No, probably not. Sorry. Why?
Yeah,
Why would you say it's appropriate for children? And she responded by saying that, well, me and my partner, husband, are currently going through a separation. He has come out of the closet. He's homosexual. We want to, we're doing this in as gentle and kind of way as possible, but we want to explain to the kids that for us to be together, despite the fact that we love each other, would be like him taking off his skin every day and putting it in the closet, and that's not who he needs to be. And I was in Morrison's when I got this, and I got it on the app for Kickstarter, and I was fucking weeping right next to the sort of tinned mandarin.
Oh man!
And I was just like, oh my god, no! You don't have to give anything, but thank you so much. Like, please. And I think she did give us a few bucks, so it's really nice. But I've emailed her a few times afterwards, being like, I hope it's going well. Did you like the film? Was it appropriate? Please don't show it to your kids. But but no, and then that was one of the interpretations as well when I go to Sam, like particularly the scene where he does specifically hang it in his closet, the ski, and I was like, let's try it that you're the guy from Arizona who has to leave his that basically has to split up his family, and what's that going to mean, blah blah blah. Not split up family, but and change the dynamic of the and yeah, the idea of resentment is that like there is no villain in that story. It doesn't need to be, and it's just this sadness that just can tear people apart, and that a lot of people live with forever. And to me, the thing that I think is really tough is that what if you don't do the tearing skin thing? Like, what about if this relationship is now what you have and all you have, and you've given so much away that now all this relationship is all you have, and what do you do then? What if the relationship isn't working then? How much are you going to want to hang on to it? And how toxic would that itself be? It's all to me, these are very scary ideas, and these are the kind of horror films I guess I like to make. If I like horror films at all.
Well, I mean, the way you feel, it's ironic given the way you feel about horror films.
Yes.
You use horror imagery very, very effectively.
Thank you.
But you use it to tell very, very human stories and to explore emotions, specifically things like love, in a really tangible kind of way. And sometimes if love hurts, sometimes it feels horrible. Sometimes it can be horrific, and maybe using horror imagery is a way of trying to reach somebody in a way that they wouldn't necessarily be reached otherwise. I mean, the story about the couple in Arizona is a perfect example, and that was before the film had actually been made.
Yes, right? that was during the funding. Maria's story had been out there for about a few months at that point, and we'd released a video of her reading the story, and so I think maybe she'd seen that, or maybe she must have seen the Kickstarter and then seen her story. I'm not sure how, but it was like one of the first examples of just like, oh no, that's thank you. That's exactly that. You're why we make this film. Thank you.
I think it's great that you're able to kind of pursue that. Just kind of looping back to your journey into film for a second. As I say, this is the reason why you make these films, but these types of projects don't necessarily pay rent or
this paid absolutely no rent. This paid negative rent. This film,
exactly. I mean, and one of the things that you hear a lot of people, one of the biggest impediments to getting into film, or when people don't support you getting into film or the arts in general, is like, oh, how are you going to feed yourself?
Yeah.
You do have to find a way to make that art make money in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to push for your short film to do gangbusters at the box office or something like that, but the art itself.
The short film box office.
The short films, yeah, precisely.
In the context of the way that we released He Took a Skin Off, I mean, it must be said expressly that this was nothing more than, and I think it's a problem with the nature of the release structure of these things, that this looks a lot like subsidizing of the middle classes, whereby you make something at time and cost of the production, which might be covered by some sort of financing of it, and then cost of your time, which is worth money, and all the countless amounts of time of the people who work on it, and then you put it online and give it away to people for free, in lieu of what? Exposure, whatever. To me, the answer is always, well, because you make art, that's what you do. I have this. Okay, so there's this story by Margaret Atwood, or story I should say. There was a Q&A with Margaret Atwood that I remember the answer to this so thoroughly, and it sticks with me so perfectly and beautifully. Yeah, this young woman went to the microphone and they were doing a Q&A at the end of a talk, and she asks something, I can't remember what she said, but she said along the lines of like, how do how do I do you? How do I become you? You write a freaking novel every year. You're incredible. You're this prolific, magnificent author who has her own genre. Essentially, you've invented your own damn
Yeah.
genre. The kind of genre I like making films of. Me personally, Ben speaking now. Like, how do I become you? How do you do what you do? And her answer to that is the answer I try to basically copy constantly and try and talk about endlessly, which is, she said, okay, so like, let's imagine that you're me, right? Or you're you, and you've just gone to English literature course at somewhere, okay? And you're there, and you sort of look to the left of you, and you look to the right of you, and there's all these other people, and you're all there, and you're at this race, this marathon style race, okay? And you're at the sort of starting line. God, I'm really bad at telling a story. You'd think I was some sort of storyteller or something. Anyway, bang, choosh, you go, and you sort of, you to the left of you, to the right of you, everybody you've been working with and studying with, you all come out together, and you're all writing furiously, and you look to your left, you look to your right, and you're all running and moving forward, and you're trying to write and scribble something down, and you get to the end of the page, and you decide, it's not very good, and you throw it away, you trip over, and you hurt yourself, and you pick yourself back up, and you keep going, you look to your left, look to your right, and you can still see there's a few people here, it's going well, it's going fine. All right, keep going, and then you write something more, it end up being okay, so you pull it out of the notebook, and you throw it away, and it maybe gets published, but who knows, you can write the next one, that one gets published, but who knows, you write the next one, and like, oh god, we've got the start of a novella here, we didn't finish it, doesn't matter, keep going, look to your left, look to your right, it's starting to thin out. And like, oh god, I must be falling behind. This isn't very good. It doesn't matter. You just got to keep focusing on the game, man. So you keep writing, keep turning over something. And now you've got a novel, and you've written it, and it gets published. Fantastic, great. You've got to write the next one because there's nothing on there. Keep moving. Look to your left, look to your right. It's starting to really thin out. And then you've been doing this for a while now, and you keep writing. You look to your left, you look to your right, and there's absolutely nobody there. And you must be so far behind. And then somebody comes up to you from the side of the thing as you're running, and then they ask you, "How do I become like you?" And the point being that this art game thing is about sustainability. It's not a sprint. It's this long, slow game. And the way I think, when I described how I kind of got into this thing, was like, I realized that as a kid, I was sad if I didn't even think I had the word sad for it really, but I realized that I wasn't happy if I wasn't doing this thing. And it's the same for Maria. She's a writer, man. Sucks. It means she's got to write. Writing takes a lot of time, and writing's really hard, and nobody pays you for that jazz. And even if they pay you, they pay that much. And and in a way, it's a curse. And it's okay to look at it that way sometimes. That this thing that you want to do, I appreciate that in my life there are certain things I'm not going to be able to. Maybe I think it's irresponsible for me to maybe even have kids potentially. At least now, there are things in my life that I'll sacrifice to this machine of creating this art and making more stuff. But so then that way, yes, if you know, it's a gift in a way to know from a very young age this is what you want to do, but at the same time it is also this curse, this thing that is what you do. But you can't let that consume and overwhelm you and become everything about how you make your art, because the point of art is that it's life-giving. You do this because it's an expression of yourself and everything you want to do and be, and it's a beautiful creative birthing process that you can't sprint through. You can't get 9 women together for a month and make one baby. There's a certain kind of quality to the creative process, and so to my big word about this is the idea of sustainability, and I've started to realize what that looks like for me and what kind of income experience I can get doing all sorts of other little bits of jobs and stuff to kind of pull the money in to keep the work going. And now as I sort of I'm 33 now, and as far as the HMRC is concerned, I'm in a very, very nice position right now actually. Like we're getting paid to write screenplays. But I'm still turning over on all sorts of weird corporate films constantly. I'm editing something probably later on this afternoon that's going to be 2 people in a room, 2 heads talking about a bank or something, I'm sure. The only short film I've ever made money from, and that was only in the sense of like that it paid back, was we sold Russian roulette to the New Yorker at Sundance, so that meant that we could afford the flights basically to have gone to Sundance. That was good. And then we were able to sell a short film we made called Afterlife to an app called Vero, which was very kind and generous to take it, and they've been really wonderful about it, and wonderful people who and then we were able to pay back our finances for that film as well. So that was a film that itself turned profit, I suppose. But I think now, interestingly, there is a position and opportunity to genuinely make a living from short films as the art form is now becoming more sort of God, it's what a film is changing, or like post theatrical cinema and all these sort of things. The ability for people to consume shorts, consume, horrific word. I'm terribly sorry. Consume it like it's content, but to actually engage with and find short film and understand what that is and what that means is a completely different world from where it was 10 years ago. That means that that's interesting in terms of profitability and stuff. But for me, that's not really how I've made any money. I've done ads, I've done bits and pieces, pilots and stuff. And the screenwriting's great, but when you write with somebody else, I'm writing currently with the chap I went to school with. We still, as I said, we failed up together, and we both get paid enough. We both get paid half a salary essentially, so it means we got to find money elsewhere. And he does voice acting, and I do lots of kind of corporate stuff and other things and bits and pieces, and it's. And what it means is that I can pay rent, and I'm not screaming all the time, and I'm not exhausted. So it means that for the 3 hours a day where I'm working on the creative stuff, and I do choose my hours, and I say this is how I'm doing it, and I can log off and log out. At least on like at the moment we're delivering our next draft, and so we have to sort of, it's probably a little bit more than 3 hours a day, but it's that, you know, that's the only way I can see it makes sense. And for me, unfortunately, I can't work. I think a lot of people might be more comfortable working salary work and finding a way to make that work with what they do. I can't find a way that fits in with how my brain works. So everything I do is essentially freelance, and I've now got to a point and to a comfortable enough position in that with enough people I work with that it seems to make for a sustainable income for me.
Right. Yeah. Because I think, and that's fantastic. I think, again, it goes back to what we were talking about before, when you, again, number one, you can't imagine yourself doing anything else. Number two, you internalize what the objective actually is, i.e. make this film or make films full stop. Then your mindset becomes, okay, so what is the answer to this particular problem? If you entertain lots of different options in terms of the things you could do, then that's precisely how the practicalities of life would say, oh, okay, well, this filmmaking gig just seems too hard. This banking thing seems a lot more stable.
I love it. I love those the two.
You know what I mean?
It was between this and becoming a finance baron or something. Yeah,
those are the two options.
Yeah,
right,
really was,
right?
Yeah.
Filmmaker or banker. That's what the role consists of: filmmakers and bankers.
Yeah, right.
But I think
bankers, the artist of money, aren't they? Really?
Well, there is some truth to that. But
they make fantastic scripts.
But I think it addresses directly this notion that film doesn't make money or short film doesn't make money. When you dedicate yourself to the arts, you find a way to survive through that process, because you can't imagine yourself.
I should probably add as well, like, I'm a wonky filmmaker. I do not, and have, when I go to my agents, they're like, should I be doing like a Hollyoaks? Like, should I try for this? And they're like, well, do you want to? And I'm like, no. Do you need to? No, I mean, I'm fine editing like some internal like education video for some company for half a day. Then yeah, fine. I think it's very, like, I think other filmmakers might be, because I don't know. Once again, I'm very lucky. Like right now, we're basically getting to do the dream of working on the big one, the big thing that's exactly what we want it to be. That should cost way more than it should, and that we should be allowed to be given, and that is essentially, what He Took His Skin Off on Me is like if it were bigger, and what that would look like, and that's all really, really cool. And so I kind of realized that if I'm doing that half of my life and half of the day and half of the week, I can't really take something that's going to take the 100% of my time and my heart out of it. So I have to try and find something that I can log in and log out of that isn't terrible. Absolutely no film career looks the same. It can't do. One of the things that's difficult about film schools is the expectation going in that we are going into is essentially like a trade school, or like like where they're going to teach you how to get into the business or whatever. Where in reality, if you're teaching in a film school, even if you're 6 months out of the business, you're out of the business. And however you made it up through the sort of camera team in the 80s is irrelevant to how it looks like now, what that means. And the German film school, the DFFB, where we were lucky enough to do grading on for He Took His Skin Off. Dinner and Movie, actually. They demand that their lecturers spend 6 months of the year in making bloody actual films and making half their salary doing actual films. Because if you want to understand what it's like to work in the modern film industry, what the career would look like, what the paths would look like, here you go. But in terms of like writer, director, frou-frou, artists, like me. I don't think it is replicable. So in terms of in terms of how one's career would look like and how one can learn from other people's careers, the best lesson is you have to find a way to make this sustainable for yourself, consistent, and also that you stay with your friends and you make friends and you make those friends who you can make art with, because this is not a lone game unless you're doing certain kinds of animation or certain kinds of storytelling. I think you'll only be limited by being on your own, and that in reality it's the people that you came up with and can make with that are going to help lift you up and rise you to the next thing. There we go. Absolutely. That's my thesis on
I love it. Yeah. That's fantastic. Additionally, and just to touch on your point, that I want to stress that everybody's circumstances will be different. And to reiterate, I'm not saying that all you need to do is just sit down and figure out a way. But I wanted to kind of convey, or through speaking to you, hopefully get a couple of answers as to what are some of the ways in which you can make it sustainable, and that and to kind of get rid of the notion of the immediate response to I want to focus on art being a death knell to your own prosperity or to your stability and all that kind of thing. And also to kind of touch on the point you made about the collaborative nature of it and all that kind of thing, kind of reminds me of something that Oscar Sharp said when he was on the podcast. Everyone calls directors filmmakers, but we don't actually make films. We kind of stand in a crowd waving our hands around while other people make films.
That's a very intelligent Oscar thing to say. That's like the sort of thing I wish I would say. That's really smart.
But no, he's an incredibly smart guy, and that segues us into the films that you picked that have had an impact on you. I think one of those was The Common Line, wasn't it?
It 100% was. I was thinking about this in terms of like what films would I want to talk about here, because this is the bit I'm most excited about. It's talking about the other people's films, and I think I decided that the parameters of the films that I would talk about would just be films that I wish I'd made that. And for me, like The Common Line, actually no, I don't wish I made that. It's the kind of film I want to make when I grow up. It's kind of the way I think about it. Right. It's just wonderful. I just love this film so much. It's everything that I love about film. It's a lot of the same sort of philosophy about storytelling that I think is in He Took a Skin Off For Me and is in the work that I'm currently sort of building towards. Like the idea that this sort of domestic fantasy, or the domestic sci-fi perhaps would be the way of saying it, but this domestic magic, the idea that like a neighbor's semi-detached house down the road with Topps pizza flyers stuffed under the door or something, there's something incredible and magical and also deeply boring going on all at once, and there's just this sort of and carry on quality to engaging with genre filmmaking, specifically in a British context, where it can just be this. It doesn't need to be ironic and big and crazy. It can be just this beautiful, and obviously the metaphor is so clear and transparent and gorgeous, and just and now having gone through the process of dealing with, since seeing the film for the first time, having gone through the process of actually dealing with family members and people in my life, dealing with cancer and other sorts of diseases and stuff, like that experience being just I refer to this film in my mind constantly as sort of a warm pillow to sort of rest my ideas on, and but more than just the quality of the film itself and just how much I just love it just as a piece of art and how it makes me feel, just genuinely I think it's an achievement of just a statement on what I think British films can be, and the kind of films that I want to see way more of, and I just think it's brilliant, and not to say come on, the performances and the quality. I just think I love this film, and I want everybody to see it at all times, and I always talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar conversation with Oscar. It's normally when we do film recommendations, I'll do them in advance. I'll say, okay, yeah, that's a really good film. I'll take note of that, and I'll write my review for it and put it out in a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And when I put the review out, that'll be the first anyone hears from me on X, Y, or Z film. When I saw The Common Line, the second I watched it, the second that I got to the credits, I stopped. I went onto social media. It's like, I'll get to the review, but
get your eyeballs.
Go watch it right now. Here's the link.
Yeah.
Go watch it right now. And about a week later, I actually put the review itself out, and following that, Oscar came onto the show very kindly. but it's so deeply affecting. I don't think I was any use to anyone for the rest of the day after I'd watched it. But you know, it was just so layered in the way that it just took it very, very similar to the way He Took Skin Off of Me was as well, in that you could take this outlandish sci-fi or horror-esque concept and just apply it to something that is so sadly relatable.
The way I like to think about it, right, is that like I cannot go away and make a film about a toxic relationship falling apart and it be a film. Like, I do the realist version of that story, and I don't think I would want to necessarily watch the realist version of Olivia Colman getting some sort of tumor and dying, and then the family letting go of her. Like, there's something about to me, I feel uncomfortable simulating that reality, like in reality. To me, that feels like false.
Yeah.
It feels like lying. It doesn't feel true. And maybe it's just because we're broken from growing up on video games or something. But to me, like, the way you tell the story in the most honest way is to kind of cut right to the heart of the sort of illogical dream logic feeling sense of that emotional intelligence intuition thing, where it feels like, oh, that's exactly what it feels like. And the accomplishment of the story is to as you're watching it and as you see her start to float up and you sort of realize, oh God, oh, I know it. And then suddenly you're remembering the bits that are coming to you, and it actually strips the specificity, weirdly, from the context of a universal experience, and allows you to kind of then access it by being like, oh, I know the feeling. I know that feeling. And
to imprint your own experience.
And in the same way that, like, the best stand-up comedy are those things that make a comedian might say something where, you're like, oh, that's exactly what it's like. Yes. Like, oh, of course, I forget that. I could never put it into words. It's that kind of capturing of the idiosyncrasy through this sort of beautiful melding of genre and dream logic and just transparent allegory, where it's just we're perfectly, also tonally, just magnificently, like, delicately done in a way where it never violates that tone and never violates the sort of and again, I think this movie could have been so much crueler. There's a crueler version of the story, and similar to Skin, where it's like, oh, this is actually this is a generous and loving version of this story, and that makes it oh so much more wonderful and oh so much more engaging and oh so much more powerful.
Yeah. I think stories that are able to do more than one thing, that are able to take you to a place you didn't expect to go by doing something maybe a bit outlandish. Those are the films that more often than not end up having the biggest impact, I feel. Some of the other films you talked about, the Centrifuge Brain Project, that kind of stuff for me. Because it's very unclear as to where that's actually going, but at the same time,
I brought this film in, right, because I don't know quite why this film has been so inspiring to me. But when I first saw it, it was when we were in pre-production on Skin, actually, and it's very much informed some of the very loosely, very early stages, some of the ideas I'm currently working on right now, where it's just, I was blown away by its commitment to capturing a really shitty reality. That this magnificent and glorious idea of this insane science with just infinite amount of money making these absurd merry-go-round projects, which feel slightly like they're kind of exercises in CGI creation for the filmmakers. But the idea that it's then being shot, with like bad headroom in overexposed digicam, with him sort of just rambling on about his studies to some what feels like student filmmaker who's come in to do something about this guy. Something about this sort of the marrying of an incredibly hyper-real aesthetic with this comedic and funny and brilliant and genuinely just like gonzo premise that doesn't feel as obnoxious as something like, I don't know, Cloverfield or whatever, where it's like very like, like it's the weird. There's, I don't know. I like that film because it's fun, but it doesn't like affect me. Whereas this one, weirdly, I just feel like it's like the scene at the end of The Shining when Duvall like running up, Shelley Duvall is running upstairs and she sees the guy with the dog or bear the costume on or whatever and sucking off the guy out in the room, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? And I'm so confused, and it scares me so much, and it makes me so, but that's like for me that's like best bit of that film, where it's like, what the hell is going on? And it really pulls you out and it demands your attention. And this film is like that, and like structurally it's kind of odd because it just sort of ends and it feels like it was almost a bit improvised and loose and it's a bit too long, but I love it because it keeps on making me go like, what the fuck is this film? like, what is this? But in a way where it doesn't eject me, it pulls me in, and I think that's with these sorts of films where it's like, if you were to be like, oh, it's a film about a woman who starts floating up in the air or whatever, it's like, oh, that's dumb, that's silly. Like there's an element to which, delivered incorrectly, that would propel you away, but rather it's a tonal achievement of wanting to pull you in and be like, no, tell me more. And that's why I love this very funny, very silly film. It's which is, to people at home who haven't seen it, I guess it's a mock documentary about a fantastical, like merry-go, like Ferris, magical roller coasters that are made, and for some reason, and they're all horrifying, and it's all treated very boringly and very seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the fact that you have that sort of visual dichotomy of as you say, this kind of student-esque looking documentary style thing, and then you've got some very, very good CGI doing those rides.
Yeah.
Just having the two of those things kind of exist in the same space just kind of really grounds you into that whole experience.
I don't think that it necessarily works as a narrative construction. I don't think that's even what it's trying to do. It does feel more like an experiment in story structure and storytelling. And I guess the wonderful thing about short films is that is genuinely how freeform they are, and how they do not have to have freaking central characters, 3 act structures. They definitely don't need introduction sequences, I'll tell you that much. Stuff like
that. And Taking Stock was another one as well, which, while very dryly comedic, was also, I found, profoundly sad.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's just somebody who just imagined a whole other life for themselves, and that their art would take them in these amazing directions and have these amazing adventures, and realizing that life is kind of marching on and you haven't gone anywhere or done anything. And at the same time, the actual shots he's taking, the actual stock footage he's creating, it's just beautiful.
It's so beautiful. I've seen this film so many times. Maria had a short film. I first saw it in Encounters, and it was in her program, and then I've seen it a bunch since. And it's one of those short films I think it's just perfect. I think it's irreplicable, and I think it's a film that again, I'm like, I wish I had made this film. I love this film so much, and it's perfect, and it's so funny and so sad and so beautiful, and the way that it marries those tones, just so inviting and warm, despite being so sad. And I think it's magnificent, and I love it, and I want everybody to see it again. It's like all these films, I want everybody to see these films.
No, and they're all quite short films as well. They're in between 4 and 6 minutes each. The longest one I think was probably Merry-Go-Round.
Oh, Merry-Go-Round, yeah. I think Carmen Line's longer, isn't it?
Oh no, Carmen Line's longer. Yeah. No, I tell a lie. Carmen Line is longer. But yeah, Merry-Go-Round is probably about the 12-minute.
Yeah, 12-minute mark. Yeah, which is sort of I think just because of the nature of the delivery platform for short films, I think you go longer than 12, you really risk doing damage to the goal, I believe, of short films, which is to find an audience, to get in front of an audience, which is partly why this bloody Carmen Line is so incredible, is because
it holds you so long.
It busts through that wall easily. But no, I thought, again, this is another film I just saw at the same time as I thought about it, because I thought at the same time as I saw Taking Stock, and I just think is magnificent. This is probably the funniest short film I've ever seen. I adore it so much. Now I'm trying to find some sort of overarching theory of why these films are all in this bunch together, but in reality, I wish I could have made it, and I think it's brilliant, and I just love it.
It is hilarious. The thing is, again, it's one of those films where you're not 100% sure where it's going at the beginning.
Yeah. It looks like it's a gangster film for the first little bit. It looks like incredibly important rush, and it's shot like these European Cannes important films, and it's so beautiful. It's so well made, and it's just about a bunch of drunk twats getting locked up on a bloody merry-go-round, and it's so good. This film takes me on a ride, man.
Though I think quite possibly the funniest smash cut I've ever seen. Right at the, I'm probably going to ruin the movie, but as you know, we're building up to what is potentially the hero moment.
Okay, we have a certain musical cue reaches its climax, and then yes, okay, yeah, no, I agree. That is. It's. I was watching it just before this because I just wanted to watch this film again because it just makes me laugh. And I thought on a perfectly boring Friday morning, it'd be a wonderful thing to do. And oh my god, that cut is so the way it flows into it's just
genius,
perfection. And that music cue is a little. You'd think it would be on the nose, but it's just also the sort of thing they might just play at a theme park somewhere, you know. I adore this film. I know nothing about the filmmaker. I know nothing about the film. I've just seen it a dozen times over, and that's about. I cannot wait to see more from this person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What I think we're probably going to end up doing is putting links to all of these films with this interview, so that people can get a look at them and get a bit of context as to what we're talking about. It's a fantastic selection. It's a great pick. So thank you very much for bringing those to my attention. I hadn't heard of quite a few of them actually, so that's brilliant. But what is next for you, then?
Yeah. Okay. We are. I don't know what I'm going to say. Really, it's a bit annoying. We are
because you mentioned Half the Life.
Oh yeah, well so we sold this to this app called Vero. So it's about 2 years ago. So it's I don't know if we're allowed to put it on any other platforms really. But if you want to go watch my film that we made in the woods in Wales called Half the Life, I love this film. I really love this film. It's a bit more. He took a skin off on me than Dinner Movie and Russian Roulette. It's a bit more magical. It's a bit abstract. But I love this film, and we were very lucky to be able to basically get the opportunity to go off in the woods and make a movie together, and it makes me really happy. This is my one profitable film, actually. It's a film about two limbros who are in what we assume is limbo, which is Wales, and it's about these. They're together and they've been together forever, and it's just about them essentially breaking up. And I love this film. We made that. The very act of making it led to the very bizarre leading line of dominoes that led to us being able to sell the film to important people who our feature. I mean, so now we're in the process of writing our feature called John Moves In, sort of the same kind of magical domestic big crazy ideas that are very difficult to do, and I think actually the way that we've set up this film, it's going to be even harder to make than Skin, but the joy and like significantly harder. But the joy of it is making it feel like it's boring, and that's kind of that's what we're working on right now. And it's all very exciting and very fun.
That's amazing. That sounds fantastic. Please do stay in touch with us and keep us up to date with how those progress as and when you're able to actually give us a bit of info. And if people want to see more of your work, where can they find you generally?
benastondirector.com. But yeah, just Google me or Google He Took a Skin Off for me. You can find it all there. I try to put all these, like the one on Vero is the only film that I think isn't really out public on the internet. You have to download this app to watch the film. But everything else I put online, I think it's really important for filmmakers to do that. Just see Took a Skin Off for me if you want. Go check out the other ones. Online would be the answer.
Fantastic. Ben, thank you so much. It's been such an amazing conversation.
My pleasure, man. I'm sorry I didn't get back to your email straight away as well. Like, this took such a long time. I'm so bad with my inbox. I'm just so, I was like, no, at the start of the week, I'm going to go through everything. And I found this from all the way a few months ago. And I'm just so glad that I could come on and say, and just thank you, because this podcast is great. You guys seem awesome.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, you've given us an amazing episode just to put out there. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, dude.
Thank you, Ben Aston, for joining us for this episode and for taking the time out to talk about your work. Well, that's it for this episode. Make sure you come on back for our next one, where I'll be talking to writer-producer Stanton Nash and director Sam Buntrock about their time travel adventure short film, Recursion. This is a film we cannot recommend enough and ties into a big announcement we've got coming up very soon. To make sure you don't miss that or any other episodes, subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell to make sure you receive all notifications to new videos. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to the Cameo Launch Short Film Podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and many more platforms. For more highlighted short films, head over to cameolaunch.com to check out some incredible pieces of work. You can find our reviews on cameolaunch.com/reviews, and if you're up for a bit of cinematic retail therapy, head over to our online shop at cameolaunch.com/shop to snag some movie swag, including classic filmmaker box sets, cult movies on DVD and Blu-ray, screenplays, books, and more. As always, keep up to date by following us on the socials at Cameo Launch on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us. You all stay safe, and we'll see you next time.